What's up, everyone? I figured I would look over the gems now that we actually have some gem numbers and now that people started cooking with them. Just to go over them, like which gem is good, which gems are worth considering, and which gems are just bad. So let's just get into it, right? Let's start with Control Blazed. I think this gem is very interesting. It gives chance to ignite for mapping, which is sometimes hard to come by. But the interesting part is that it works like nothing else we have ever had. It is gonna probably feel a little clunky and awkward, but thanks to default forces, it might be a very strong like single target gem because you can get big ignite rolling and then just keep refreshing it, right? And in the best case scenario, Control Blaze can actually give you up to 72% more damage, which is the second best support for ignite attack skills right after Ruthless. It should be decent. Like if you are playing melee attack skill, you are probably using this on single target, even though it might feel awkward for map clear. Also, worst case scenario for mapping, this gem does nothing, right? Which is like, it's annoying, but it doesn't delete your damage completely. So it should be fun and it should be worth to use, at least sometimes. It is gonna take some cooking though to get like proper value out of this, and you will definitely have to use default forces to actually keep up the good ignite rolling. When I first looked at Corrupting Cry, I felt like the numbers on it actually look pretty good. 600 base damage on level 20. It was almost double of Corrupting Fever. I was like, this is gonna be OP, right? But the more I started thinking about it and the more I looked into it, I realized how limited the scaling is, both because you cannot scale it properly with gem levels, and there's not that enough supports to link to it, and it has to be linked to a Warcry. I think this gem is gonna end up being basically never used except for Forbidden Shackle. I don't think you can make this good enough without it. Similarly, I thought that Flamewood support would be useless, because I looked at it initially. I looked at Retrieve Totem, Decoy Totem, and they both looked pretty unplayable. But I missed the one important part that was shown to me by Vago and Terrence. Val Warchief has like 5 times more HP and does 5 times more damage than the other totems. I think this is gonna be literally the most clunky gameplay style ever in PoE. But if the damage is good, I could actually see people use this. But I don't think you can ever map on this, since you have to place down a totem, wait for your totem to get hit, wait for a meteor to fall down, and then wait for your ignite to kill enemies. I don't think you want to map on this. And not even talking about the part that without Val Warchief, you have like 20% of your actual DPS. So I think if this ever becomes a usable skill, it's just going to be as a boss killer. Guardian Blessing is just another blessing that doesn't stack with other blessings, so you cannot add this to your build with Divine Blessing or anything, but it might be a decent substitution to Divine Blessing for minion builds. The degen is pretty high though, and I think except Animate Guardian, it's gonna be pretty much impossible to mitigate. Some people were cooking up some Holy Relic stuff, but I don't know if you can actually get enough regen to keep it alive. At least not at max level. Maybe the degen is lower if you use level 1 Guardian's Blessing support. So maybe if the level 1 gem is like 5% degen or something, I could see it being a lot better. But as it is, I think it's unusable on non-minion builds, and I think for minion builds is good, but you will probably have to link your Animate Guardian to it, which is not a big problem, but it will eat up 1 extra gem socket on it. Should still be better than Divine Blessing in general though, easier to get going. Drama support numbers are way higher than I expected, and the only problem I see with the support is the fact that it adds flat damage only. So in my opinion, the only places where you can really use it is, or the only weapons you can really use it with are Frost Breath, Brightbeak, and Pillar of the Cage God. I don't see you using this ever with a rare weapon. Maybe early on if your weapon is really bad and you need like single target while mapping, but you shouldn't really need it early on. The self-hit portion of this skill is lower than Bone Shatter, so any like regular jack build should have 0 issues sustaining like a lot of trauma stacks. It shouldn't be a problem at all, and overall, I think if you use the 3 weapons I mentioned, it should be a very solid support, enabling a lot of strike skills to actually shine that are not Bone Shatter. You might see some Glacial Hammer builds, you might see some Molten Strike builds, you might see even some Frostblade builds. I think this is an extremely good support, it's just very limited use to the before mentioned unique weapons. Oh, I almost forgot, just before someone suggests Paradoxica, you cannot use it with swords, okay? Everyone, when they first saw Trauma, they were like, oh, this is gonna be OP with Paradoxica, but nope, only Axis Maces, Scepter Staves. My favorite support of this bunch of supports was Volatility support. This support, if you use it correctly, it's legit 58% more attack damage, which is way better than any other support you can really compare it to. The obvious cases are Ignite and Bleed, especially Bleed, where you can combine it with Verslata, and the more multipliers multiply each other. You will have to fish for a good bleed, but it shouldn't be a big problem because bleeds usually last quite a while. You won't be able to use Crimson Dance with it, but that's not a big deal. But the actual interesting use cases for me were number 1, Replica Albaron's Warpath that throws from 1 to 80 chaos damage. So it's 58% more damage for that build. And number 2, lightning builds that have huge damage range. So for example, I was looking at an Ephemeral Edge build. I think that's what the weapon is called. And for that build, it also was like 56 or 55% more damage. The support is like insane if you use it in the correct scenarios. You just need to make sure that it actually makes sense to use. Speaking of insane supports, Locus Mine is also numerically insane. I know I'm saying insane a lot, but this mine gives 3 times more damage, or up to 3 times more damage than both Blast Chain or High Impact Mines did for attack skills. I think if this doesn't feel clunky to use, which it might a little bit because of the not being able to detonate it within a radius of 30, but radius of 30 is like not even half a screen, so I think it's gonna feel completely fine. And it basically 2.5 to 3x's your damage for attack mine skills, which weren't popular before, but I've seen people cook up some Tornado Shot with this, cook up Kinetic Blast, Lightning Arrow, even Explosive Arrow Ignite. Like, there is a lot you can do with this skill, and I think it's gonna be used just because it's numerically overtuned, and people will just deal with the downside of not being able to detonate mines when you're close to them. Returning Projectiles is a replacement for Vengeance Cascade, but unlike Vengeance Cascade, it also works on spells. And it doesn't have the same downside that the Nimis Topaz Ring has, so we might see some cool new builds that we couldn't do beforehand. If you can always return a projectile, if you can always hit with your returning projectile, it will deal 40% more damage, which is already a good support. And for some skills, like Molten Strike, it will be even more than that. And it could be insane for stuff like Ice Spear or Bore Lightning. We would just have to figure out how it's actually gonna function. But I expect a lot of builds using this support in place of Vengeance Cascade, and a lot of new spell builds of people experimenting with this. I was initially really excited about Sadism support, but the penalty of less duration was a lot higher than I expected it to be. And I think it will feel really weird to use it if you are only using one skill for inflicting your Ignite. So what I think is the best way to approach this is you map and you use 2 different skills. The usual setups that people could go for is like you clear with Wave of Conviction without Sadism support, and then you have a single target skill like Wild Flame Blast that you link to Sadism, and you ignite with it, and then you keep refreshing the ignite with default forces by recursing the boss over and over. And you can keep the 80% faster ignite on the boss basically forever if you never let the Arcanist brand fall off. This damage support is about 25% more better than the second damage support in the game. So technically it's insane if you can use it properly. But if you use it for mapping for your only skill, I think you're gonna hate your life, because I think it's just gonna leave a lot of struggles behind. The other use for the support could be some low tolerance build utilizing Alchemist Mark maybe, but I'm not smart enough to figure those builds out. Could wait for the next Junkron video for that one. Devour support is probably the only thing I would ever rate lower than Diablo 4. This support is completely worthless. I don't know why GGG decided to add it to the game. It adds literally nothing to the game except something to complain about. I don't think you will ever use this support for anything. I'm not a minion expert, but fresh meat support doesn't look that good to me. That said, there was a new mace announced today that is really insane for crit minions, and it might make it better in that way, but at the same time, if you use that mace, you probably don't need more crit chance, so it's really hard to say. The minions I would expect to be used with this are like Animate Weapon, maybe Skeletons. I was initially really excited to use this with SRS, but the duration is just too low for SRS to be good with fresh meat, I think. you would get adrenaline for like 2 seconds, not even usually, probably 1.5, which is just not good enough. Frigid Bond, Link Scale, didn't ask, don't care. I don't know why they keep adding more Link support. That said, the numbers on it are actually okay. You lose 1 support because you have to link it to a Link, but it does about the same damage as Vortex does. The problem is that you actually have to link yourself to someone or a minion, and you can't really do that in your regular Colded build, so I have no idea how this is supposed to be utilized. Maybe some like Elementalist Colded with Golems, but I don't expect any use of this skill. Sacrifice seems really strong numerically, but I've seen a lot of people thinking about using it on League Start, and I would advise against it. I think it's gonna be really, really strong, but I think you need the whole setup with Dissolution of the Flesh and Wrath Bit for this to really shine. Otherwise, sacrificing 20% of your life each time you cast is just gonna be really difficult to deal with. Numerically though, this skill is gonna end up being like 3 times, 5 times more damage than Added Chaos, so it's definitely gonna see a lot of use this league. I think everyone who likes Wrathbit builds is super excited about the support. And it might become one of those things like we have in Archmage meta, where you just put Sacrifice on everything and you can play any spell you want. Lastly, we have Spellblade. I expected the number on Spellblade to be a lot lower, but the current numbers are actually really good. I think this support is insanely strong on day 1, before you can really scale gem levels well on gear. And I expect people to use it mainly with unique weapons. The best ones, in my opinion, are Rebuke of the Wall if you are like Ignite Elementalist, Vulcanus, Wide Wind, or Breath of the Council for Impending Doom. And then I expect like a pretty big drop-off for Spellblade until we get to like absolute min-maxing endgame, where people start using like Fizz Gavels and other Fizz weapons to add Fizz damage to skills that normally don't deal Fizz damage, like Spark or Ventrua, and scale it to Light Poacher and Hatred. And I think we're actually gonna see this support used a lot for that scenario, because it scales really well with Headhunter. Those are my thoughts on the new supports. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like or a comment. If you disagreed with anything, let me know. If you have any ideas that I missed or you want to inform me about, make sure you let me know. And I stream daily on twitch.tv/Ventrua. See you there.